All right, welcome everybody to Civic Tech YYC here for March 12th of 2024. Tonight we have solving community problems with gamification. Tim Lip is going to be taking us through some questions focused on some discussion, talking about how do we evolve the boundaries so our systems can evolve without threatening everything good we've created so far. Before we dive in with Tim, a land acknowledgement here that CivicTechYYC is an organization that resides on the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot First Nation tribes of the Siksika, the Piikani, I'm losing my here, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Stoney and Dakota First Nations tribes of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and Tsuut'ina First Nation. And this is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and the Métis Nations of Alberta. If you're logging in from another location this evening, please feel free to share your land acknowledgement for the region you're located in the chat. The Civic Tech movement is a movement of technology for public good. Using data, we design and address challenges that citizens and governments are facing, help citizens and governments work together to use technology, data, and design, pursue opportunities for greater citizen engagement and more effective services, as well as grow public engagement and enhance digital services in ways that are more inclusive, responsive, innovative, open, and citizen-centered. Civic Tech movement is a global movement that has expanded drastically over the last 15 years through organizations like Code for All. In the US, cities like Chicago and Boston and New York City have led the Civic Tech movement and have also had national organizations like Code for America, US Digital Service, and 18F. And there are Civic Tech organizations in many locations across Canada, which are all listed on the Code for Canada website. And there's government agencies like the Canadian Digital Service. Launching Civic Tech, we launched it back in 2017 by bringing together people who had an interest in improving the community through technology, then leveraging the support of the City of Calgary and the Rainforest Alberta Network. The driving force was to break down the barriers between sector silos and create a space for collaboration, addressing challenges and opportunities of citizens and government. And the civic tech community just sits between all of those different areas between citizens, government, entrepreneurs, and startups, as well as technology industries there. Some of our major projects have included the Budlip project, which is an ongoing one on library database management. We've run blockchain experiments, testing blockchain for applications that aren't just cryptocurrency, as well as Volley, which is a volunteering app that was started here by Alice Lamb. We also have civic user testing groups. They're grassroots groups that facilitate better and more inclusive and accessible usability testing that engages residents in the creation of technology that's meant to serve them. And civic user testing is a concept that was started in Chicago and has spread across through many cities, including Toronto's GRIP program. And through Civic Tech and in partnership with Calgary UX, we started Inclusity Calgary. And Inclusity Calgary is a team of technologists, designers, public employees, community organizers, entrepreneurs, policy analysts, and other engaged citizens that all share a vision that Calgary can be a more accessible city for all. The mission is to plan and design and run testing sessions with inclusive and representative groups of Calgarians to improve the usability of products, processes, and services for teams in public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. We're proudly supported by the Calgary Foundation, and as I mentioned, it was created in partnership with the other meetup group in town, Calgary UX. Just going over some of the other partner organizations and groups. I know I still have Rainforest Alberta on the list there. Unfortunately, they're no longer doing the Rainforest Lunch Without Lunch, but you can still find their website as well as the social contract that's on there. But we do have a list of other groups you can get involved with or check out. There's Code for Canada that helps to run Civic Tech and support us. There's Calgary UX that I've mentioned. There's also one of our sister organizations, Data for Good. There's also the YYC Data Society. Platform Calgary is the space downtown where you can meet a lot of people who are in the startup industry. Another group we like to support is Immigrant Techies Alberta for immigrants getting started in tech. And the Test Tribe is one that started up recently, also focused on user testing with their more regular meetups. And if you want to connect with us on Civic Tech, there's all our other socials. So there's the main meetup page that you may have signed up for here through our website, X formerly Twitter, Instagram, Threads, which we've added, LinkedIn, and Facebook there. And then with that, I'm going to stop my share and hand it off to Tim for our main session this evening.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ross. Give me 1 second to get my display all set up. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's great to be able to share this with all of you. Can you see that okay?
Yep, that's coming in good.
Great. So some time ago, I was under a lot of pressure. To be precise, 250 atmospheres, which is equivalent to if the entire weight of an elephant was stepping on your big toe. And I was not unique in that experience. That was actually all of us who are now alive have a piece in that, because that's what a lot of scientists suggest how life emerged. Life emerged deep, deep, deep under the ocean at hot volcanic vents. I know you didn't come here for a chemistry lesson, but you'll understand why in a second. When that process was happening, little chemical processes began to coordinate together, and eventually those processes put around themselves a boundary, and the very first cell was born. Collaboration and boundaries and collaboration between different boundaries is what life, I believe, is all about. And that's what this conversation is going to be about today, is how we can make that process happen better in the interests of our institutions. Presenting on behalf of the Center for Social Impact Technology. And my name's Tim Lip. A quick summary of what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the center. We're going to talk about how we can scale trust and the collaboration that's important behind that because of what life itself is. We're going to talk about some of the fundamentals of gamification. You're going to learn 3 reasons for gamification, and Ty's going to share a little bit about the neuroscience behind that. You're going to get to experience it. Then we're going to dig into a real-life case study. Brenda, is actually the president of an organization called PMAST, and they have a specific project in Airdrie that we're going to focus in on. We're going to play 3 games to make an impact in that organization, and then we're going to get to prizes. So, Center for Social Impact Technology, what do we do? Feel free to read the description. You can also find it on our website. But the way I summarize it is we essentially work to make sure that technology has the best positive social impact that it possibly can. We have both a Calgary focus, working with local organizations in and around Calgary, but we're also tapped into international trends like the Digital Governance Council of Canada and how data systems and some of the work with large corporations and some of the rules that they need to follow in order to make sure that that impact is the best it possibly can be. The exciting thing about technology is that it can scale really quickly. And that's also really scary. What are the boundaries? The process of boundary testing, and this talk itself is part of a larger conversation that Ty and myself and another individual have had over the last week, where we spoke about games with internal auditors. So that's the kind of large corporation. We spoke about it with data scientists at Data Con. But the important thing is to really ensure that our governance systems are designed in the best way that they possibly can be, so that the really big waves that technology creates aren't compromising the boundary of us as individuals and are in fact developing better boundaries for us as a society as a whole. When we're looking at the principles of gamification, there are 2 fundamental elements I want you to keep in mind. Designing a game is incredibly complex. It's a lot of work. and it's something that can be very overwhelming very quickly. But there's really two things. I kind of think of them as the left hand and the right hand when it comes to designing a game. The first one is finding a feedback loop, and the second one is wrapping it in art. So a feedback loop, we all play Angry Birds. A feedback loop is a process of shooting the slingshot and the immediate reward that comes from that. The art is the design of the pigs, the design of the birds, the design of the slingshot. All of those come together into the game that you play. You experience the story. Keeping with, there's 8 dimensions of what you can also use as to make sure you're doing all the right things in your game. So I kind of think of those as the 8 fingers of gamification: 8 fingers, 2 hands, and then the opposable thumbs, just for fun. I'm happy to share this with any of you if you're interested in it. One thing I do want to say is, if you're as kind of living my own reality, there is going to be a number of games throughout today. The very first game you get to play is, if you send me your email or some way to contact you in that chat and stay engaged for the whole presentation, you're going to be entered to win a prize, which is a book of poetry that I wrote. So game number 1 is stay engaged, and if you stay engaged the whole way through, you get a book of poetry for you. And just send me a way to be in contact with you. Some of you might wonder, are games really important? And I'm going to give 3 reasons why games are absolutely critical for our day and age. And the first is about how complex the world is getting really fast. This is a simple graph to show how complex different levels of human interaction have become over the last 100,000 years. It's exponentially getting bigger and bigger. And we all have a very real experience of that when we live in a city. One of the studies that people have done is they've shown that the bigger the city you live in, the faster you walk. Because there's so many more opportunities you have around you, people just walk faster in bigger cities. The pace of life they have is much larger and is much faster in the bigger the city that people are in. So that's really the first reason why. It's because things are evolving really quickly. And as you'll learn more later on, games engage different parts of our brain and allow us to make connections much faster. The second one is about compliance and the difficulties that emerge when we have so many different sets of rules to follow simultaneously. This is a screenshot from our other presenters, AJ Lee's his game, and he developed a game for cybersecurity to train cybersecurity teams on how to reduce the risks to their organizations and help them meet the compliance requirements. If we go back to this graph really briefly, not only is our experience of the pace of life and time getting faster and faster and faster, but also the amount of rules that we all have to deal with in our day-to-day lives is getting faster and faster and faster. So we need some way to curate all of those rules, and we need some way to curate the individual story that we are trying to find in our world around us much more efficiently and effectively to keep pace with all the incredible opportunities that we now have. I mean, they are incredible opportunities. We live in an era of wealth and opportunity that no one ever has before. But what I'm suggesting is that games are absolutely critical to do that. And really the last reason is something that Ty's going to talk about more, but it is that when we're playing games, our brains learn new things faster than when we're not. Sometimes up to 20 times faster. So if we can learn new sets of rules and new stories together and blend them together more quickly, we're going to have a much better capacity to actually deal with the complex, evolving world as it is. To give you a real life, demonstration of some of the neuroscience and why the neuroscience is so important, I'm going to pass it off to Ty, who will share some of his slides. Go ahead, Ty.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I realize that as not a host, I'm going to be a voice in the background. So you get to look at Tim's beautiful face and pretend that it's him talking. So basically, this journey started. Oh, now everyone can see. Awesome. Now everyone can see me. Perfect. So basically, this journey started from some of my academic research where I had to do different types of cognitive testing with patients in research settings. And we used to have to warn them that that's how boring and tedious it was going to be. And it really got me thinking, there's got to be a better way for us to, collect this health data from people that doesn't make them want to fall asleep, quite literally. That's actually the intention of some of the tests. So slide, please. So what I'm going to talk to you guys today is about this concept of burnout, go through a little bit of the neuroscience of it, and then I'm going to share with you a demonstration of how we can gamify some of the assessment of the risk factors that go into burnout. So I'll start off with a little bit of exposition so that we kind of understand a little bit more about what's going on in the technology. So basically, burnout has three different components. There is chronic stress, cognitive fatigue, and cynical attitudes. Those three usually arrive in that order, but not always. So usually stress tends to be the first thing that enters someone's life and the first thing that they notice. And once one of these starts being present, the other ones start to pop up as well. There's a spiraling phenomenon that happens there. So I'm going to walk through these so then that way we can have a little bit of a better sense of exactly what goes into this. And again, really come at it from the biology and what's happening in the brain. Slide, please. So stress is actually not necessarily a bad thing, despite what I just said. It can actually be really adaptive. So if you think about going for a bike ride in Banff National Park, it's a really nice day. You're enjoying yourself, and suddenly there's a bear behind you. When this happens, your brain is going to send stress hormones all throughout your body, and it's going to allow you to channel all the energy that you possibly can in order to make a new best record. And you can thank the bear for that. And this is an example of how stress can be helpful because it helps us really rally our energy and deal with threats, deal with challenges. Or at least that's how things used to be from an evolutionary perspective. Slide, please. So instead, this is probably more the stress that we all resonate with, especially since we are coming into tax season. I just scheduled my end of year with my accountant, not looking forward to that. No disrespect to the accountant, just not my favorite pastime. But the thing about taxes is that it doesn't happen in a very specific event. It can be a very long drawn out thing. There's an ongoing preparation process, and our brains really weren't designed to handle stressors that were that long term, that didn't have such that don't have immediate resolutions. So as a result of this, those stress hormones just keep getting pumped into our bloodstream, and this can actually start to impair certain functions that our body does. And in particular, this can happen to our brain. So slide, please. So when these stress hormones get to our brain, they actually interrupt certain circuits. So I'll get everyone to just quickly post in the chat. How many people can eat a single Lay's potato chip? Or if you eat one, do you end up eating multiple? Just quickly put that into the chat. The bag is gone, most of the bag. Major fail on one. Oh, someone says depends. So far somebody has a functioning focus network. So that's the brain network that actually is behind this particular illustration. So what the focus network does is it allows you to take a goal and focus on it and cut out distractions and prevent yourself from doing impulses that might get in the way of that goal. So if your goal is to eat a single Lay's potato chip and to be able to, resist the temptation of having, the whole bag on, as is what happens in the case with me, then you really have to engage your focus network in order to do that. But if this is all it did is limit our chip intake, it wouldn't be a very useful brain network now, would it? So slide, please. So it's actually got a bunch of other uses as well. a lot of us as professionals are probably paid to pay attention to details, and we've got a lot of specific training to help us attend to particular kinds of details, whether it's details in data, details in people, details in things going on around us. And if we don't have our focus network turned on properly, it's going to be harder for us to be able to pay attention to filter out distractions and really hone in on those details. So as a result, our cognitive performance actually suffers, and we'll actually be less effective at our jobs, whether they are, working for a company, or whether it's taking care of a family, or being present for people within the community. Regardless, we're not going to be as attentive to those kinds of details. So that's one of the consequences starts to happen with burnout. Slide, please. And the final piece is that brain network is also responsible for emotional regulation. So when it gets fatigued, we also start making emotional decisions that might be questionable. So for example, I tend to get a lot of emails lately of random invoices from people, and I'm like, I didn't order this. And thanks to Tim and a colleague of ours, I know that that is spam, and I know that it's a phishing scam, so I don't click on it. But if I'm in a really drained emotional state, I might see one of these emails like, oh my God, who is doing this now? And accidentally click on it. And then I've exposed myself to a security threat. So that's what, again, the kinds of things that can happen when we don't have our brains and our bodies at full capacity. And those three components, in turn, is how we actually measure burnout scientifically. So in this demo that we're about to do, yeah, you can advance the slide. So in the demo that we're about to do, there's data that actually corresponds to each of those individual components of burnout, except we tried to make it fun and as engaging as we possibly can. So I invite everyone to scan the QR code. We'll also post the link for the demo into the chat as well, in case anybody's camera's not working. There we go. And this should automatically log you in and get you to do a gamified burnout risk check-in. So this is something that we would do with right now, typically our corporate clients. However, we're doing a partnership with PMAS Youth Legacy in order to adapt this technology for helping at-risk youth, for doing some wellness assessment and customized training curriculum through this application. So that's an example of how this technology that was initially built for one particular purpose, burnout risk assessment, can now be repurposed for other needs within the community much more readily. And I'm sure that Tim and his colleagues will share a little bit more about this initiative in just a moment. If anybody's having any glitches with the app, feel free to put that into the chat there, and I'll see if I can help anyone troubleshoot.
You're going to come to a screen, click check in, and then you're going to be given a little survey with sliders about how you feel in the moment. There's those number of different sliders. And once you responded to those, then you'll hit continue, and you'll answer a couple different elements, like give some context to responses. And then you get to the game, which will actually assess. It's called Cube Rush is the name of the game.
Mike's asking in chat, what does a prohibit sign next to the plug mean?
So that means you might have to go into the settings and fill in your age and gender for the scoring for some of the other features that are in there. So there's another survey that's available. So if you you might have to, yeah, again, specify your age and the gender for it.
One of the things I don't like about games, while we're in this honest time, great work, Tina, is they always make me feel smaller than I'd like to be. Like I lose more often than I win.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about this particular game is it's all relative. You're just looking at trying to understand yourself. And the more you understand yourself, the more we reward you with more information about yourself.
So you mean to say that even though I'm failing, I'm actually winning because I'm getting to know myself better?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's very normal to like not perform well on cognitive tests at 7:30 at night.
Yeah, because I did this my worst. Well, yeah. That's comforting.
Yeah. No,
And
Tim,
I feel like
did this demonstration with a bunch of auditors on Thursday at lunch, right after they were well fed, and watched the scores go up.
Which we did on Thursday, and there were great
Yeah.
scores. I think even there's one of the biggest benefits of games, and I might talk about this a little bit later, is it does create a boundary that allows failure so we can go through the process of self-discovery.
No, 100%. Because again, it's all about just knowing yourself, understanding, in this case, what are the times a day where you might be a little bit more vulnerable for some burnout risk. And then that way you can make plans accordingly. Yeah, maybe now's not the time to review your bookkeeping because the focus network's not quite on its peak moment.
Going to one of the other time, I'm going to build on something you said earlier about cynicism and the impact that chronic stress has on cynicism. For those of us who are trying to enact positive change in the world, cynicism is, of course, our biggest challenge, and I struggle with it all the time. Ty, is there anything? There's a story I actually want to share about how I used a game in a very personal situation to help me get out of cynicism in a moment. Ty, is there anything else you want to talk about?
That was largely it for the demo, is again to illustrate that we can take this theory and use that to design gamified experiences. And again, as people poke around and answer the other questionnaires, they'll be able to unlock additional personalized wellness content.
And I should say, Ty is a PhD neuroscientist. I'm not sure if that came through, and he has done a ton of research. So it seems like a simple game, but it's actually incredibly backed by science and a lot of hard, careful thought. Before I go ahead, I just want to share one quick personal story of how I used games to make in a personal situation. On Thursday, we were going to a presentation, and that morning, we were going to present a lot of this content to a bunch of auditors. So this was me presenting to all my future bosses on this idea of gamification and audit. Everything was going poorly on my trip in my morning and my trip there. And one of the things I started doing was I started a simple thing of tracking, keeping generating a feedback loop every time something went wrong. And what that did was as I started to make a list of counting how many times something went wrong, I realized that when something started going well, I was almost disappointed because I didn't get to add to the number of things. Simple feedback loop, wrapping in an art is a whole other conversation. But now we're going to build off of what Ty said and some of the work around gamification, and we're going to try to make it real with a specific organization that needs help and support with its positive civic mandate. And the organization is Peer Mediation and Skills Training, which has an initiative in Airdrie called the Youth Legacy Project. And the official boring title is Reducing Youth Criminal Activity and Recidivism. What that means is reducing the number of youth in the criminal justice system and the amount to which they continue going in a life of crime. I did some research on the Canadian government website, and each crime costs anywhere between $1,330 to over $5 million, depending on the crime that's committed in Canada. Each one of those is a feedback loop. We're trying to reduce those feedback loops on society because of its negative impact. Brenda, if there's anything else you want to jump in and add a bit more context about PMAS and this project in Airdrie, feel free to go ahead.
Well, I think it's more than just reducing it for the sake of the community and the money. It's also to help these kids, to get them on a better track and a better with better life skills. As we were told a number of times from a fellow who was senior staff at the Calgary Young Offender Center, the saddest thing in the world is having these kids in lockup for however long and sending them back home into the same environment without any new tools to cope and expecting them to be different. It doesn't work. You have to give them, you have to assess their needs and find out what resources they are lacking and provide them. Otherwise, it's a revolving door until they age out and become adult offenders. And numbers from probably about 4 years ago, Canada was spending over $14 million every day on adult incarceration alone. And when we asked our core advisors, which also includes a retired family and youth justice judge, how many of the adult offenders were young offenders, they just laughed and said basically all. So we may not be able to change the adult offenders at this point, but if we can turn a few lives around, we can not only save a lot of money, we can help these kids from a pretty bad experience in life.
And Brenda, do you have any context on what is the role that conflict and conflict resolution, or lack of conflict resolution skills play in increasing the risk of someone becoming a young offender?
This is something that our core advisors totally agreed on, that the one common denominator with these youth is their inability to deal with conflict peacefully. So that's why PMAS, we said, okay, we can do that. And then, of course, once we get going into it and doing more research, there's a whole myriad of needs that go far beyond conflict. And so they will all receive conflict management training. But we are also joining forces with other organizations in the community, including psychiatric help, including Boys and Girls Club, for job preparation, for mentoring, for different kinds of skills. We are working with the Airdrie Pride Association. We're going to be doing cross-training between our board and their board with them, and a number of organizations like that. The bottom line is we are looking for referrals from the police, from the judicial system, from schools, from coaches, from parents, anyone who has a kid who's they think is developing behavioral issues can send them to us, and we can look after this. And we have funding from the federal and the provincial governments for a 3-year project.
So conflict is a key, lack of conflict resolution skills is a key underlying issue. And PMAS and Youth Legacy have some resources. I'm sure they'd love more. So if any of you have leads on that, feel free to connect with us. They have some resources. And what we're going to do now over the next 3 games is we're going to put in place some structure, some frameworks using games to help them do that effectively. And hopefully along the way, we all learn how we can apply games in our own context, in our own situations, to enable better civic tech impacts because of both the mental realities and also the complexity managing features that a game has. So without further ado, drum roll, please. Let's get into game number 1. Let me explain the rules, how it's going to work. You're going to be split out into breakout rooms. So you're going to all be in an individual space where there's 3, maybe 2 if we have an odd number out, individuals. You're going to share a story. You're going to take turns sharing a story. So the first person shares 60 seconds or less, second person shares, third person shares. And then you're going to agree on the best story from your group. And then we're going to share the best stories together and vote on what is the best story of what answers this question. And the question is, a time when you were surprised that conflict could be good. So a situation where you actually found that conflict, you thought it would be a bad thing and turned out to be a good thing. You learned something from it. I have a situation today. I had an email chain with Jeff, and him and I had like a tiny conflict. We called, we talked about it, and I think we learned more about each other and built trust. Jeff, feel free to disagree with me in the chat and we can keep the conflict going. But a situation where you had expected conflict to be bad and actually turned out to be good. So Ross, if you can go ahead and bring people into split people out into breakout rooms. Feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to make sure what the instructions are, or send us a message if you have any questions. Just while we're waiting for everyone to filter back in, before we start sharing stories from each group, does anyone want to share anything about how that experience felt? If not, no pressure, but I thought I'd give an opportunity to see if anyone wants to share just a snippet of what that felt to talk about conflict with a stranger.
We were very appreciative how brave each other was. It's like, wow, you did that. And yeah.
If there's any vulnerable, yeah, feel free to throw in the chat too. I like that.
It's quite interesting because we were all struggling to think of an event that had conflict.
Okay.
But we did have one story, so she will share her story.
Okay. Let's actually dive right in there. So because I'm conscious of time. Whoever Flo was talking about, share your story.
Hi, I can go ahead. So I'm Jocelyn, and the story I shared was from a previous work experience. I guess I'll try to condense it, long story short, but my team was there was a team, like an operating team, looking for support from the business side, and there wasn't a correct, like a direct counterpart for them to support them. So myself and someone else were kind of voluntold to support them. And then this created an issue just because we already had our own workload. This was felt over our capacity. So that was the conflict, but how we approached it was working together to, support the area of the business, get this done. But then also it helped open up the communication with our manager to share how the experience went, and so that we could have a better strategy moving forward if something like this were to come up.
That's great. I love that. Who else? Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Remember, everyone, Jocelyn shared one. Someone else, could you share? Anyone else?
I was selected with my story. When I was supervisor at the Energy Resources Conservation Board, I had a lot of young staff, the men and women, and they used to get very upset with one another because their jobs all hinged on what the other person did. And so to mitigate this, we had a file in my desk drawer, and somebody had a beef or an issue, instead of yelling or doing whatever, they would write a note and they would stick it in my file. And then every Monday morning we had a meeting to discuss the issues and take the person out of it and just say, we have an issue here and something isn't working. And what do we have to do? What checks and balances do we have to put in place? Or what processes do we need to change to make this work better? And it was a great team building effort. And also the staff had to take turns chairing the meeting. So it worked really well and was, like I said, just a great team builder.
Cool. Amazing. Someone else.
So not something shared in group. Hi, I'm Kirsty. I'm the other co-founder of Youth Legacy. My business is called The Experience. I'm not sharing anything within this decade, and it wasn't even in this province, just so that people think I'm not sharing something about a client. It was a separation and divorce that I was mediating. And what Brenda had just mentioned about separating the person from the actual problem, trying to focus on that. But even before that, focus on the dysregulation. A lot of what Ty was speaking about, where is it within one's own dysregulated body state and or misreading of the body state of the person or persons in front of one? So within this divorce, it was highly contested. It was high conflict, pretty normal finger pointing, there's my dyslexia, and blame, as opposed to responsibility or just focusing on the problem. So how did conflict help in that situation? In a positive manner, it helped them learn about their own body states and dysregulation and what that can mean for the individual as well as the larger group, whether it's just two people, a whole family, or business, so on and so forth. We're all individuals regardless of the relationship. It translates across the board, and conflict can help break down various barriers like it did in this situation, and learning points to move forward, whatever the future is going to look like.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Christy. Christy. Next group. I've got 3 groups so far. I think there were 6 groups, if I'm not wrong. Ross, sorry.
Yeah, there were 6 groups total.
So we're missing 3 groups.
Yep, I can share from our group. The example was playing in a team sport, and imagine something goes wrong. You know, somebody makes a mistake, or a number of people make a mistake, and creates a lot of conflict. You know, on the court, and there's a timeout, and you're huddling around, right? And then so this is the moment that the coach comes into play, and kind of the maturity of the team. So you can huddle, you can have a bit of a discussion of what happened, why it happened. But the power is to realize that you're better together, right? And then to be able to collaborate and work together, and not be blaming one person or relying on one person, but be acting as a team. So coming out of the huddle, being able to take that energy and actually perform better. So that's the positive. We also mentioned that it could actually go the other way as well, right? If it's a immature group with a poor coach, I mean, it could actually spiral downwards, and you could be way worse off after the timeout.
Okay, group 5.
So for me, I'll be speaking for my group. There was an issue I had while I was living back in South Africa. So I had a colleague who had problems with his accommodation, and he spoke to me, and we agreed that he would stay with me for 2 months. So after 2 months, he wasn't saying anything, he wasn't giving me feedback. And getting to the end of the 3rd month, I had to confront him. And being someone that doesn't like confrontation, there was a little bit of emotions. Then he had to explain that he had some issues processing his visa and stuff. So at the end of the discussion, I had to apologize to him, and he also apologized. So it was a great learning curve for both of us.
Okay, go ahead. In group 6.
Ty and Sarah, I found both of your stories a little more compelling than mine was, because I think it gets to a core truth around conflict.
Yeah, I think from Ty's story, it's like relates to mine in that you can talk about difficult discussions, like difficult topics with people in your life, like friends and family, and like not be afraid they'll leave you, because that was one of my fears, like, oh, if I bring up conflict, they'll not be my friend anymore, or they won't want to be around me. But no, like when I actually confronted people that I was frustrated with, and then we talked about it, and they said, why didn't you bring this up a year ago, you know? Then you realize it could have been dealt with faster, and you wouldn't have all these like feelings tensed up.
Okay, now we're gonna select the best choice, and I think. Sorry, you mentioned Ty's story? I didn't. Ty, did you share a story and I just completely spaced out?
No, they commented on the story that in hindsight I realized no one else was privy to.
Okay, could you share that story?
Okay, so the TLDR is so basically I was got into a new relationship recently and I saw a behavior that I wasn't, entirely comfortable with. So I called him out on it and I was initially, a little concerned that, that would lead to, a bad outcome. But he actually appreciated the fact that, we were able to then have a productive conversation about it and the issue became resolved. So in that sense, being a little proactive about trying to call out some bad behavior ended up helping us overall improve our communication skills.
Okay, so I took quick notes of that. And Ross, I should have asked you to make a poll, but maybe what I'll do is if everyone just comments on my thing with the number of the story you really like, the one that gets the most comments is the one that wins the game round number 1. So game decided by popular opinion, perhaps the most terrifying game of all. I should say this, some of this structure I learned from something called the exchange approach, which is a way we're actually playing a game on a game, talking about games. So I really appreciate with this extremely meta moment with you all. No other votes? Okay, Brenda, you win. And you win a great prize. I won't show it to everyone right now. We win an absolutely amazing prize. You're going to love it. Next, we go on to game number 2, which is the most loops game. If you remember correctly, there's 2 hands of how to gamify for a real problem, social problem. And does anyone want to see if they remember what they are? There's a clue. There's wrap something in art, and what's the other one is?
Find a feedback loop.
Feedback loops. So what we're going to do right now is find feedback loops for PMAS, so for the Youth Legacy Project in Airdrie. There's going to be 3 breakout rooms. You're going to have 4 minutes to build the biggest list as a group that you possibly can. And the team with the longest list of unique loops wins. I'll leave it for you to organize among yourselves. If you want to do like a spreadsheet or like a Word document, write down the list. If you want to type it into the chat and copy it all, that's also okay. But you're going to have to make sure you copy it before you leave the breakout room and bring it into here. Otherwise, that list will be disappeared forever. So you're going to have a breakout room in 4 minutes. Do whatever strategy you'd like to generate the longest list of feedback loops. And that is generic intentionally. Whatever you think could be a feedback loop, maybe should be a feedback loop for the Youth Legacy Project in Airdrie. Any questions before we break out into that? Those 3 rooms, and they're called Disco, Alternative, and Blues. Feel free to have theme music if you want to, but no pressure. Anyone comments on how that felt, what that process was like? And be totally honest.
I can comment. I thought that I was, it felt comfortable and people were really open to sharing. That surprised me. I don't know anybody in that room. It kind of felt nice in that way.
That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess for me it's something that we do all the time, but not putting it into words, like naming it as a feedback loop. That was something cognitive for me.
Oh, cool. That's great to hear. Anyone else? I know for me, one other thing I felt was I should have put in place better technology to keep track of the feedback loops of everyone writing down feedback loops. So for our team, I'm just going to post, because I was writing things down. This is the list that we generated. I'm going to post it in the chat and then count the individual line items, except the last one's a double space. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. From our group, Disco Room over here, did any other group have more than 11? See, Margie, your group, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
There's what we came up with. We only had 7.
Well, this is embarrassing. My team won. Well, I guess prizes for the rest of you. You're also going to get amazing prizes, which will be determined later on. We're now on to game number 3. And hopefully you haven't gotten super bored yet. But if you have, get excited. For the last one is wild. And maybe not that wild. It is really simple. And that is, there's going to be 4 minutes of silence. You're on the main room. I'm going to mute. We're all going to mute and take time and create some art. Whether it's a poem, a sketch, a photo, anything. And email it to email at centerforsocialimpacttech.ca, or you can tag us on LinkedIn if you prefer. And if you CC or tag anyone in Airdrie who you think would be interested in this initiative, who we should connect with, who I can connect PMAST with and the Airdrie's Legacy Project with, go ahead and do that. You get bonus points if you do. So you have 4 minutes to write down a poem, sketch a stickman drawing, literally anything, and send it to the email info@centerforsocialimpacttech.ca, which I'm going to monitor. And can you use AI? Well, that's an interesting. Depends how much water you want to spend and electricity. I think AI uses the equivalent of like 30,000 homes each day in America. Yes, that's email. So go ahead and use AI. Let's see what we can come up with. And the wildest art, the theme of the art is really any of the stories, conversations you've had up until now, whether it's the feedback loops, the stories of conflict, something you feel maybe that resonated with you, that you feel inspired about. Any questions before I start the timer?
The piece of artwork should be doing now, or could we use something previously, something that we had already?
You know, I was going to say do something now. Do something now, but feel free to share as an extra bonus point something you've done previously. These are all going to be judged by me. This is very much like beauty is in the eye of the facilitator. And so I'm going to pick which art I think is best and give you a prize. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear, but the time is too short.
Even if it's something small.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start the time in 3, 2, 1. 4 minutes. Okay, that's it. There I shared my poem that I wrote too, so you can all see it. I'll actually read it. Or yeah, does anyone want to share what that felt like while we're waiting for the last couple of people to hit their email submissions, or I guess message in here? Any comments on what it felt like to do that?
Since for me, I had no plan to make art, I therefore had no expectations about how I was going to do. So it was very nice just to do something knowing that it doesn't technically matter. It was kind of freeing in that way.
That's a great way to approach art. I realize that time is running out, so I'm going to move on. I had some really profound questions and reflections that we won't talk about. And that's it. Thanks so much, everyone. Great presentation. Great for you to come in. Thanks so much.
I think, Tim, if we want to go into the profoundness, I know we have a presentation still from the one group.
I was hoping someone would yell at me and be like, where are the prizes? We want the prizes. So that's not actually the end, but apparently you're all too nice and haven't learned a thing to have conflict. So let me dig into the prizes. Okay, prize is number 1. So for those who had the best conflict story, because you have so much conflict in your life, perhaps with a loved one, especially Ty, you get a special edition of the Uncover Me, a card game for couples board game. A friend of mine designed this board game you can find on Amazon. It's the couples game proven to make honest discussion and learning more about your partner or a date or a friend a really good time. So, Ty, you're going to get a copy of this. If anyone else wants one, buy me coffee. I have an extra. Prize for number 2, the teams that did number 2, you're going to get a collection of cards from the Artist as Changemaker Institute from the Trico Center for Social Impact on how artists can be change makers. Because you're so good at making lists, you obviously need to be better at doing art. So that's what you're going to get. And for whoever has the best art, you're going to get something that allows you to spend more time just making your art. And that is the service of me doing 10 sales calls for you to whomever you want to pitch you on your behalf, so you can spend more time by yourself doing art. Those are the prizes. Now let me get into the interesting conversations. Just a couple of quick questions to some stones in your shoe to take away with you. Number 1 is, are games how we curate conflict into creating community? We've all found stories in our own lives or heard them of conflict actually creating something good. Maybe are games just the process of using conflict for the better? Today, we made a bunch of feedback loops, and I didn't actually count the number of arts that we made, so this was a guess. But on those 2 hands, take those away with you and use them in everything. When you're having a bad day, start counting how many bad things that are happening, and then make art of it. That's what my book of poetry is art about something bad that happened to me. And the last question is really just a reflection, something you can think about. Do you know how long the coast of Britain is? The answer is it's infinitely long. It's just a matter of how short your ruler is. If you have a really small ruler, you're going to measure all the little nooks and crannies. You're going to have a really specific picture of all the different boundaries that are there. So think through what are some of the new boundaries you discovered through this in yourself, through others, through this whole process. And now I'm done for real. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let me figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
You're not sharing your screen. You're good.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Ross.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. Really appreciate it. Any last questions for Tim before we get into our presentation this evening with our group with their idea that came out of the last hackathon there?
Well, thanks everyone for your time this evening. As Ross mentioned, early last month, a few of us who are in a group called Careers in Technology and Innovation, we formed a group and participated in the hackathon that was happening called YYC Hacks. So now we'd like to walk you through the solution that we came up with over that weekend and see any ideas that come to mind from the greater group. So here's the beginning of our presentation, creating an accessible city. Our team name is Curated Calgary, and the problem statement for the hackathon was how can we use technology to make Calgary more accessible to newcomers and visitors. So we really leaned into the newcomer aspect of this and really putting ourselves in their shoes in this weekend. So understanding that people from all over the world come to Calgary, come to Canada, and there's so many issues and complications and roadblocks that they face, whether it's will their credentials be validated, adjusting to the seasons, and even being able to build a community of people that are like-minded to them. So we wanted to make that experience a little bit easier and using technology. So at a high level, we looked at the immigration numbers for Alberta for the first half of 2023. And you can see the interprovincial number was 17,000, international newcomers was 39,000. So the total to Alberta for the first half of 2023 was 56,000. Over the hackathon, we did speak to a few individuals that were recent newcomers to Calgary, trying to understand what their pain points are and what's important to them and what they're looking for. So as you can see here, employment opportunities, housing options, language proficiency and practice, and then also seeking support services and kind of community. So as I mentioned, the problem statement was finding a way to use technology to make Calgary more accessible to newcomers or visitors and newcomers, and we leaned into newcomers. So this brings us to the solution and the app that we were able to develop over the weekend, which is we called First Step Calgary. And so it's an AI-based aggregator of resources that are currently available for all permanent resident newcomers coming to Calgary. So now I'll stop sharing, and Ryan is going to walk you through our actual solution in Figma.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Weeb. I'm a UX UI designer, and I was one of the team members in the hackathon. So let me just share my screen here. Everyone see this okay?
Yeah, we see that there.
So as Jocelyn was mentioning there, with so many newcomers that were coming to Canada in the last couple of years, and specifically Calgary, we focused or we recognized, I guess, this how inundated these people were with different tasks that they needed to complete just to get settled in Canada in general. So First Step Calgary is an app that helps these newcomers by aggregating information from like a federal, a provincial, and a local level as well. So this includes information on everything from completing, government documents, getting a driver's license, social insurance number, learning English. So we take all this information and we aggregate it into an easy to follow action plan for them to follow. So this is our home or landing page here. So the very first step that we ask them to do is just enter a name and an email address and set up a password. So just click next here. So to help guide users through the onboarding process and answer questions related to some of the tasks that I mentioned before, we created this little character, Botsy. So Botsy is an AI-driven chatbot that is trained on hundreds of government resources. And so to start off the onboarding process, we start collecting different information on the user. So I'm just going to walk through and just select a few of these ones. So from here, we dig a little bit deeper into building a profile for that user to kind of discover, what brings them to Canada and what they need help with the most. So for this purpose, I'm just going to select that I'm an immigrant. And so these action plans, they can be very detailed or they can be focused on only specific things. So for this purpose, I'm just going to select all, but they could dig deeper into specific things with job searching, English classes, if they need to open up a bank account. A lot of the different things that I was mentioning before are all included into here. So if I just hit that. So once they hit that button, we also were compiling their address into here as well. And this gives us, or it gives Botsy the ability to recommend specific businesses that might be in their area that can help complete some of these action steps. So if they don't know where they're going to be living yet, we give them ability to just place the marker anywhere in the city where they think that they might be wanting to live. And this way it will compile a little bit more information on that specific area rather than the rest of the city. So once they have gone through the onboarding process, they've selected everything, given their address, BOTSI will then go and create an action plan for each one of these people, specifically on what they were looking for help with. So you can see, like we've got a list of permits and paperwork, some housing, transportation, employment, banking, and finance. All of this information is generated by BOTSI. And like I was saying before, we've trained BOTSI right now on about 200 different government documents. But we also want to look at more things from a local level as well that are more specifically for Calgary. So if I just click on one of these, you can see it's going to give you, a different list of some of the permits and the paperwork that the person's going to have to worry about. So let's say, that person's coming to Canada and they need to get their driver's license. Well, where do you go to get your driver's license? And if I just click on that, you can see it's going to, if we had a location marker somewhere in the southeast Calgary, it's going to place a bunch of different registry offices around the area that they are. So you can see this is our basic app. And we also have the ability to have mentors in here. So that's kind of a future step that we're looking at maybe adding in the future. So once you're in here, you've generated your action plan. If you have specific questions that you want to ask BOTSI, you can do that at any given point. So I'm going to pass this off to Ahmed, and we have a working app, and using ChatGPT, he's going to go and ask BOTSI a question or two here. So Ahmed, if you can take it over.
All right, so I created a build of our app in an Android. So I'm sharing from my Android phone right now. I can be able to share my screen. And so I just built an app in Android. And so you can just click it here, and that's BOTSI. You can ask any questions, and these are the action plans that we start with. For example, if a permanent resident coming to Calgary, we want to give them a plan for the first 90 days. So with housing, with employment, or with SIN number and driver license. So you get like some information initially in all of these categories. And then from there, you can ask BOTSI any question you want if you need more details. So I'll start by, we can maybe start by someone asking us a question. But we're gonna, BOTSI looks into those documents that it's being trained on right now. And as long as the information is in those documents, it will give you a quick summary from that. So anyone wants to give it a try? So things like, for example, the first thing you need to do when you're coming to Canada, like for example, SIN number, driver licenses, or even where's the Calgary like airport? How do I get my driver license? So in like 5 minutes, 5 seconds, sorry. It gives you like information. So it gives you information about the licenses. It's saying you here to complete a graduated driver license, GDL, and it gives you the link as well, way to get more information. And yeah, so that's what we have right now. We already have a server running that talks to ChatGPT to get the information, to get the question. And the answers from there, and we have an app built for testing. I think that's all I'm planning to share.
Should we ask it maybe another question or two, Ahmed?
Yeah, we can do that.
How about let's ask, does this one have location where we can ask where the closest registry is?
We can do that. So where is the closest registry? So yeah, I live in Panorama Hills, and that's the closest register to me. It's in Country Hills Boulevard, Northwest. And yeah, again, it shares the link again. So like what we're gonna build later on, like for example, this I can click on the address and it shows on the map for me. We have the map, but it's not built right now.
I see Mike asking in chat if it could use
Oh,
another
sorry.
language.
Yeah, one of the problems that we experienced when we were kind of just coming up with ideas for the app is how you can have different languages. Like through the onboarding questionnaires, it's pretty straightforward in order to change the languages. But because when you're training the bot, all the documents are in English, so it's going to try to respond initially in English. But that's definitely something that we're looking at adding, is how Botsy can make that translation after it goes through the English documents.
I know that's one area that's kind of a limitation where governments have to essentially provide those documents in other languages. Otherwise, when it's being interpreted by the GPT bots or translators, it's not necessarily a perfect translation. There is some increasing efforts in some areas of government to try and improve that, because by simplifying the language of a lot of government documents, it can make translation into other languages a little bit more effective for automated systems. But ultimately, it's the best if you fully translate and have those documents designed in the language that you want to interact with. With something like this, it would be a matter of trying to figure out some sort of language translation. It might be able to do something basic, but with the number of systems that you're talking about being linked into, it's more on what you're linking into to be able to provide that support than external trying to manage it. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. I've done some work with ChatGPT and AI stuff previously.
Yeah, well, we have it trained on 200 documents right now, but we do plan on adding more. But we do notice with having a lot more documents that it's going through and being trained on, that just increases the response time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of another thing to kind of
I
fight
just
with.
want to acknowledge Brenda's comments in chat, just commenting that this is amazing, and PMAST provides programs out of Nelson Mandela High School for refugee and immigrant students. Brenda says that they've been told that the young people pick up the language earlier than their parents, and they're often the ones responsible for making these connections and guiding their families through the process, and that causes extra stress. So something like this could potentially make it a lot easier. Even if they're the ones picking up English, then they have a system that can more easily facilitate that. Brenda mentions that last semester they had students who had never been to school. They grew up in refugee camps, and the transition for these students was a horrific experience. And they try to provide the skills for learning what is acceptable here, how to handle bullying and conflict, giving them a voice. And the change through the 8 weeks of that course was great to see. So thank you for sharing that, Brenda. And I just wanted to read that aloud for the recording for anyone tuning in afterward.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brenda.
Was there
we
anything
also
else?
like the idea of throwing mentors into there as well. So it's kind of like what you were saying, Ross, is, if if someone's son or something goes through this process and uses this app and gets on board and has all this information, well, they could almost become a mentor for their parents or for some of their friends that are also immigrating over to Canada as well.
And I think for sure having the opportunity to potentially have that human connection does a lot. Like, although the AI bots and systems can be leveraged and provide that kind of initial on-ramp, it's not a perfect system necessarily. And sometimes those chatbots are not the most human at interacting and providing that support. But so it's good if there is that option for that mentorship program. And I know in a lot of the immigrant communities, there are some immigrant communities within Calgary that are a little stronger than others and can provide that, but it's even just finding somebody as that first contact point to be able to get those supports and the leg up.
Is this program up and running and available now to them?
This is a prototype that came out of the hackathon. So this is a project where at Civic Tech, we try to showcase some of these projects that come out of hackathons or different ideas in the ecosystem. Sometimes they get taken up as being Civic Tech projects where we have the people managing the project coming in and promoting them during our events. But a lot of the pitch here is to try and showcase it to the community so that we can get feedback and information and supports to be able to continue moving the idea forward. I think I saw a question in the chat there about connecting the group with other people and organizations, and that's what the exact intent is for these sorts of presentations, is to showcase what they've done so far, and then the audience and people who are here attending the event can provide feedback and connections to be able to push that idea forward to the next stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, you know, great opportunity for collaboration. You know, in particular, I mean, some of the in immigrant serving and newcomer serving organizations have a lot of programs, like sort of intake programs. So, for example, Immigrant Services Calgary has a program called Gateway. And it's a human interaction where you know, the newcomer is essentially interviewed, and there's a series of responses and connections made. So, but I'm, you know, they're very unlikely to be using AI in some of that interaction. So I think having a conversation with Immigrant Services Calgary could be very fruitful to provide the AI, the power of AI to the facilitators that are making the connections in their program, but also leaving something afterwards with the newcomer as well. And then that's just one organization, right? Mm-hmm. So the Newcomer Center is another. They have a series of intake programs that could really benefit as well. And,
the reason I ask is we start our this semester right after April 1st at Nelson Mandela. And I'm wondering if this is a link, we can give the kids a link to this so they can use it if they need it. Would that be doable?
Well, at this time, like when Ahmed was doing his presentation there, he's just got that running locally. So that it's not available on the app stores or anything like that quite yet. Like kind of what Ross was saying, like to put things into context, like with the YYC Hackathon event, we were basically given the problem statement on a Friday night, and we had to come up with a solution and develop it within a day on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we were downtown presenting it. So we got quite a bit of work done within the day that we had to start putting the idea together. But unfortunately, there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done in training it, so that it, you know, gives people accurate answers. Because we don't want to be giving them, you know, the wrong documents, wrong links, wrong information. So there needs to be a lot of testing, I guess that still has to go before something like this would be publicly available. So, but that's why we're here today. We are just trying to get more feedback from everybody, seeing what they think of the idea, what we're maybe missing, what, you know, they would like to see, and then just see, if we can start rolling out some of those more features and just kind of expand upon it.
Just keep us in mind, please, for when it is ready, and we'll help get it out there for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Brenda.
I know Jeff mentioned a couple of groups there. Jeff, would it be all right if I connected you with the group to kind of keep in the loop there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can go over a number of the community organizations that inclusivity, this is part of what we do, right? Is to make some of these connections into the underrepresented diverse communities. So I can share some of those connections and links as well, for sure.
Okay, that sounds good. And thank you, Brenda. Keep in mind for next one too. And this will be on the recording as well. I do have a few people who I mentioned the application to who weren't able to make it this evening, who will be catching it on the recording and possibly reaching out there as well. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Any last questions before we wrap up for this evening? Tim, any last words from you? I don't know if you're still hanging out in the background and listening. Anything you wanted to close us out with tonight?
No, thanks so much, everyone. I just
Cool.
turned off my video to grab some food.
Okay, sounds good. Hope you're enjoying your food, and thank you again for facilitating the interesting discussion this evening.
Thank you to everyone for your input and your feedback on our Youth Legacy project. And this has been a great meeting, a great learning experience for me, as untechy as I am. Please don't give me a prize that takes technical knowledge, because it won't do any good. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Much appreciated. And thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening. I know that's a little bit over the time, but I feel like we had some really good discussion. And thank you for the group for diving in to your app idea and the presentation there. Sounds like we've got some good interest. I know it's getting late, so much appreciated, everybody. And I hope you all have a good night. And for those of you on the recording, have a good whatever rest of 24 hours, depending on when you're watching the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.